Welcome back to the Chris and Emma Show, where we dive deep into the fascinating world of nutrition, health, and the occasional tangent. I'm Emma Advanced, and as always, I'm joined by the man himself.
That's right, Chris the Plant-Based here, and thank you everyone for tuning in.
Today, we're tackling a topic that's quite literally close to home, the gut microbiome.
Yes, the trillions of tiny tenants in our tummy. It's like a whole universe down there.
Exactly. And we're going to explore how our food choices, particularly plant-based diets, influence this microscopic metropolis, and how that, in turn, affects our overall well-being.
So buckle up, folks, as we take a deep dive into the fascinating and sometimes funky world of gut flora.
Let's set the stage. What exactly is the gut microbiome?
Imagine, if you will, that your digestive tract is not just a simple tube, but a bustling metropolis filled with trillions of microorganisms. We're talking bacteria, archaea, fungi, viruses, the whole gang's there.
It's a regular party in your pants, Chris.
I try not to think of it that way, but you're not wrong. And the sheer scale is mind-boggling. The number of microbial cells in your gut can equal or even exceed the number of human cells in your entire body.
That's rather humbling, isn't it? We're outnumbered by our own internal guests, and their collective genetic material, the microbiome, dwarfs our own, boasting over 3 million genes compared to our measly 23,000.
Yeah, it's like we're practically their pets. But these microbes aren't just freeloaders. They perform essential tasks that our human cells can't handle.
Absolutely. They're metabolic powerhouses, breaking down complex carbohydrates and fibers that our small intestine can't touch. This fermentation process produces short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs, like butyrate, which is the primary energy source for the cells lining our colon.
So they're not just processing our leftovers, they're creating vital fuel for our bodies.
Precisely. And these SCFAs, particularly butyrate, strengthen the gut lining, acting as a crucial barrier. But they don't just work locally, they have systemic effects, influencing our physiology way beyond the gut.
They're like tiny messengers, sending signals throughout our entire system.
Exactly. And beyond SCFAs, the microbiome is also essential for synthesizing certain vitamins, like vitamin K and several B vitamins, and for metabolizing bile acids and amino acids.
It's a veritable chemical factory operating right within us.
Indeed. But their role doesn't stop at digestion. They're also key players in modulating our immune system.
You know, you might be surprised to learn that the majority, around 80% of our immune cells reside inside the gut.
Our guts are like heavily guarded fortresses.
And the gut microbiota is crucial for the development, education, and regulation of our immune system. They help train our immune system to distinguish friend from foe, establishing tolerance to harmless food particles and our own good bacteria while remaining vigilant against actual pathogens.
They're like the bouncers of our body, deciding who gets in and who gets kicked out.
Yeah, exactly. I like that analogy. And a healthy, well-established gut microbiome also acts as a barrier against invaders, a phenomenon known as colonization resistance.
They compete for food and space, making it harder for newcomers to get established. Some even change the local environment or produce antimicrobial substances to directly inhibit other microbes. It's like a microbial turf war in there.
A delicate balance indeed, and maintaining the integrity of the gut barrier itself is vital. The microbiome, especially through butyrate, plays a key role in keeping those barrier cells healthy and strengthening the tight junctions between them.
Reducing that leaky gut phenomenon we hear so much about.
Exactly. A compromised gut barrier can lead to things like LPS, inflammatory bacterial components leaking into the bloodstream and triggering systemic inflammation.
Not good. So, to summarize, the gut microbiome is this multifaceted entity, essential for digestion, immunity, nutrient production, and barrier function. It's a metabolically active organ with unique genetic capabilities that profoundly influence our whole physiology.
Yeah, it's way more than just a sewage treatment plant, that's for sure.
Great. So what does it mean for this system to be in good shape, and what happens when things go wrong?
Well, that's where the concepts of eubiosis and dysbiosis come in. Eubiosis basically means a state of equilibrium. a healthy balance within the gut microbial ecosystem.
High microbial diversity, a stable and resilient system, and a good balance between different groups of bacteria are all hallmarks of eubiosis.
It's like a well-functioning city, where everyone has a role and contributes to the community's health.
And then there's the flip side, dysbiosis.
Dysbiosis is when that balance is thrown off. It's an imbalance in the composition, function, or even location of the microbes in the gut.
This can involve a loss of beneficial microbes, an overgrowth of harmful ones, and often a reduction in overall microbial diversity.
And low diversity is often linked to problems. We see reduced diversity associated with a range of chronic conditions, including inflammatory bowel disease, obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, allergies, and even some cancers.
But it's not just about the number of species. The specific functions of the microbes present are also critical.
Absolutely. Dysbiosis isn't just a side effect of disease, it can be a driver. That imbalance can lead to an impaired gut barrier, triggering chronic, low-grade systemic inflammation, which is implicated in so many chronic diseases.
It's a vicious cycle. Imbalance leads to inflammation, which can fuel disease. This really highlights how vital it is to maintain that balance, that eubiosis.
And it highlights the potential for interventions like diet to help restore that balance.
Which brings us to our main topic, plant-based diets. How exactly do these eating patterns impact this intricate microbial world inside us?
As we've said, diet is arguably the most significant factor influencing the microbiome's composition and function. And plant-based diets, by their very nature, introduce a different mix of nutrients and compounds compared to diets heavy in animal products.
And when we say plant-based diet, it's not just one single thing, is it?
Exactly. You have vegan diets, vegetarian diets, flexitarian or semi-vegetarian, even Mediterranean-style diets, while not strictly vegetarian, are at least more plant-forward.
But the common thread is a significantly higher intake of plant foods compared to a typical Western diet.
And it's the unique components abundant in these plant foods that really drive the changes we see in the gut microbiome. These components act as the primary substrates, the main food sources for our gut microbes.
Let's talk about these key plant components. Fiber has to be at the top of the list, right?
Dietary fiber is definitely a major one. It's found exclusively in plants and is essentially non-digestible carbohydrates that make it all the way to the colon where the microbes are waiting, ready to feast.
And this fermentation of fiber leads to the production of those beneficial SCFAs we discussed earlier.
Exactly. High fiber intake consistently promotes the growth of beneficial bacteria like Ruminococcus, Eubacterium, Roseburia, Bifidobacterium, and Lactobacillus.
These are the good guys we want more of.
Exactly. And high-fiber diets often lead to a reduction in less desirable bacteria like certain Clostridium and Enterococcus species.
It's not just about the amount of fiber though, right? The type matters too.
Definitely. Different microbes prefer different types of fiber, so eating a wide variety of plant foods provides diverse fibers, feeding a more diverse and beneficial microbial community.
Variety is the spice of life and the fuel of our gut flora. What's another important plant component?
Resistant starch is another fascinating one. Like the name suggests, it resists digestion in the small intestine and gets fermented in the large intestine, similar to fiber.
And it's particularly effective at stimulating the production of butyrate, that crucial SCFA for gut lining health.
Exactly. Good sources of resistant starch include legumes, whole grains, and, interestingly, cooked and then cooled potatoes or rice.
That old trick? What about those colourful compounds in plants, the polyphenols?
Ah yes, polyphenols. A huge and diverse group found in abundance in fruits, vegetables, tea, coffee, red wine, and dark chocolate.
The good stuff.
Indeed. Most of these escape absorption higher up and reach the colon, where the gut bacteria metabolize them into smaller, simpler compounds that we can absorb.
And these smaller compounds are often more bioactive, contributing to the health benefits we associate with polyphenol-rich foods.
Exactly. And polyphenols themselves can boost beneficial bacteria like bifidobacterium and lactobacillus, and may even have some antimicrobial effects against less desirable microbes.
It's a regular symphony of beneficial interactions. What about protein? How does plant protein compare to animal protein in the gut?
So, legumes, soy, nuts, seeds, and whole grains all provide plant protein. Compared to diets high in animal protein, those emphasizing plant protein have been linked to increases in beneficial bacteria, higher SCFA production, a stronger gut barrier, and less inflammation.
Sounds pretty positive.
Yeah, it is. So it really sounds like shifting to a plant-based diet fundamentally changes the fuel source for our microbiome. Less animal fat and protein, more complex carbs and phytochemicals. This acts like a selective pressure favoring certain microbes.
It's a fundamental shift in what we're feeding our internal ecosystem, and the ecosystem responds accordingly. Okay, so plant-based diets provide different fuel. What does this actually do to the microbial community? Do we see big shifts in who's living there?
We definitely do. Plant-based diets tend to promote bacteria that are really good at fermenting those complex carbohydrates we've been talking about.
Like the fiber eaters.
Exactly. Studies often show more beneficial genera like Bifidobacterium, Lactobacillus, Faecalibacterium, Roseburia, and Prevotella.
Those are generally the good guys we want more of. What about the ones we want less of?
There tends to be a reduction in groups considered more pro-inflammatory or potentially pathogenic, like certain Clostridium species and Enterococcus.
So it's like we're gently nudging the balance towards a more beneficial profile. Now, what about overall diversity? We said high diversity is generally good. How do plant-based diets stack up there?
That's where it gets a bit more complex. The impact on alpha diversity, the richness and evenness of the microbial community, isn't totally straightforward.
Some studies show that plant-based diets lead to greater diversity, but others have found that vegans and vegetarians have lower or similar alpha diversity compared to omnivores.
There are a few potential reasons for this. It really underlines the point that the quality and variety of plant foods are crucial. Just focusing on that single diversity number might not give the full picture.
So it's not just more species, but the right species doing the right things.
Exactly. And one of the most consistent things that happens with plant-based diets is that significant boost in SCFA production.
Yes, those beneficial fermentation byproducts.
You can't emphasize them enough. The abundant fiber and resistant starch provide ample fuel for the bacteria that makes SCFAs, leading to substantially higher levels of acetate, propionate, and especially butyrate.
Which is a huge contrast to typical Western diets.
Absolutely. So even if the exact species mix varies, the metabolic output, those beneficial SCFAs, seems to be a pretty reliable outcome.
Okay, let's delve a bit more into those comparisons. What are the key differences we typically see between the microbiomes of plant-based eaters and omnivores?
Well, as we touched on, plant-based eaters often show higher levels of bacteria that love fiber, like Prevotella, and lower levels of bacteria linked to protein and fat consumption. And those beneficial genera, Bifidobacterium, Lactobacillus, Faecalibacterium, and Roseburia, frequently appear in higher numbers in plant-based groups.
The good guys are thriving.
Generally, yes, and there's a tendency for reduced levels of potentially pro-inflammatory bacteria. But you're right, the metabolic differences are even more consistent and perhaps more important.
Plant-based individuals almost always show higher levels of SCFAs, both in stool and circulation, and higher levels of those beneficial metabolites from polyphenol breakdown.
And often lower concentrations of metabolites linked to less favorable outcomes like TMAO and some byproducts of protein putrefaction.
So even if the microbial players aren't always drastically different, the plant-based diet directs their activity in a more beneficial way.
That's exactly the key takeaway. Despite individual variation, The functional metabolic output shows more pronounced distinctions. It highlights the importance of what the microbes are doing, driven by the fuel that we give them.
Okay, now we're really getting somewhere. We see how plant-based diets change the microbiome's function. Let's connect the dots further. How do these changes actually translate into tangible benefits for our physical health?
Right. This is where it gets really practical. This isn't just interesting biology. It has significant impacts on inflammation, immune function, and metabolic regulation. The microbiome is like the translator, turning dietary input into physiological signals.
Let's start with inflammation and the immune system. We know dysbiosis can fuel inflammation. How do plant-based diets via the microbiome help cool things down?
Chronic low-grade inflammation is a key driver of so many modern diseases, and the gut microbiome is central to regulating it. Those SCFAs, abundant with plant-based diets, are the heroes here.
How so?
Butyrate fuels colon cells, strengthening the gut barrier and making it less leaky, and SCFAs directly talk to immune cells, triggering pathways that dampen inflammation. They can even change how genes are expressed in immune cells, pushing them towards anti-inflammatory profiles.
So they're actively calming the immune system down?
Precisely. Plus, plant-based diets mean less substrate for things like TMAO production. And don't forget the direct anti-inflammatory effects of polyphenols themselves. So overall, the plant-based diet-induced microbial shifts foster a less anti-inflammatory gut with a stronger barrier, reducing that harmful systemic inflammation.
That's a powerful anti-inflammatory effect. Now, what about metabolic health? Plant-based diets are often touted for blood sugar control and weight management. How is the microbiome involved?
The microbiome modulation has significant implications here, particularly for insulin sensitivity and glucose control. And again, SCFAs seem to be key.
How do they help with blood sugar?
They might improve insulin sensitivity, possibly by stimulating gut hormones like GLP-1, which helps with insulin secretion and action. They might also directly influence glucose use and reduce inflammation linked to insulin resistance. And clinical trials back this up. Plant-based diets often improve insulin resistance markers.
Especially in people carrying extra weight?
Often, yes. And speaking of weight, plant-based diets are consistently linked to lower BMI and obesity risk in large studies, and they work for weight loss in trials as well.
What's the microbiome's contribution to weight loss?
Several things. It influences energy extraction from food, and SCFAs affect appetite hormones, promoting fullness. Plus, the high fiber content itself makes you feel full. Studies show that plant-based diets can reduce total and visceral fat, the dangerous kind.
Good points. And finally, cardiovascular health. The heart health connection.
There's a very strong link between plant-based diets and better cardiovascular health. The microbiome mediates this, in part by reducing TMAO levels, which are linked to artery hardening.
Less choline and carnitine intake.
Exactly. SCFAs might also influence lipid metabolism, potentially lowering cholesterol and even blood pressure regulation. And that overall reduction in systemic inflammation is great for blood vessel health.
So it really paints a picture of the gut microbiome as this central hub, translating the plant-based diet into beneficial metabolites, reducing inflammatory triggers, and leading to real physical health benefits across the board.
Absolutely. The shared mechanisms, especially around gut barrier integrity and inflammation control, likely explain the broad protective effects that we see against so many chronic conditions.
We've covered physical health really well, but what about our minds? The gut-brain axis is such a hot topic. How does the plant-based diet microbiome link play into mental well-being?
Yes, the microbiota gut-brain axis, or MGBA, is a fascinating and rapidly evolving field. The microbiome's influence definitely extends to our mental state.
It sounds complex. Can you break it down for us?
Think of it as this intricate two-way communication superhighway, connecting the gut, its microbes, and our central nervous system, the brain.
A gut-to-brain street?
Exactly. Communication flows in both directions, using multiple pathways: neural pathways, endocrine pathways, immune pathways, and metabolic pathways.
So many connections. And it's bidirectional. Gut affects brain, and brain affects gut.
Exactly. Stress impacts your gut, and your gut health impacts your brain.
Okay, so how do those microbial metabolites we keep mentioning, like SCFAs, actually influence brain function through this MGBA?
They're key signaling molecules. Acetate, for example, can enter the brain and participate in neurotransmitter metabolism. More broadly, SCFAs affect the brain indirectly by modulating systemic inflammation, strengthening the blood-brain barrier, regulating the stress response, and influencing neurotransmitter levels and neurotrophic factors.
What about neurotransmitters made in the gut, like serotonin? Does that reach the brain?
That's a common question. The microbiome heavily impacts the serotonin pathway, but while microbes can make neurotransmitters like serotonin, GABA, and dopamine, these probably don't cross the blood-brain barrier effectively themselves.
So their main influence is indirect?
Likely, yes, through the vagus nerve, immune modulation, and other peripheral processes. So the microbiome is this crucial MGBA modulator, influencing neurotransmission, neuroinflammation, stress, mood, and cognition. It's all connected.
It's incredibly complex. So the hypothesis is that plant-based diets change the microbiome, which then affects mental health via this axis. What does the evidence look like?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. And honestly, the research is still evolving and a bit mixed. We know that dysbiosis is linked to a higher risk or severity of depression, anxiety, and stress. So the idea that plant-based diets, by improving the microbiome, could boost mental health is definitely plausible.
And some studies support this.
Yes, some observational and intervention studies suggest that vegetarian or vegan diets might be linked to improved mood, less anxiety, and better well-being.
Sounds promising, but
other studies, including big reviews and meta-analysis, report conflicting findings. Some even suggest a higher risk of depression in vegans and vegetarians, or find no significant link.
that seems counterintuitive. What could explain that?
A huge potential confounder is nutrient deficiencies in poorly planned plant-based diets. Critical nutrients like vitamin B12, omega-3s, iron, and zinc are less abundant or less bioavailable from plants, and they're absolutely crucial for brain health and mood.
So deficiencies could negate any microbiome benefits.
Exactly. Deficiencies in these are independently linked to a higher risk of depression, anxiety, and cognitive issues.
So the take-home message is that while plant-based diets can foster a microbiome theoretically better for mental health, the real-world impact is inconsistent. It strongly suggests that nutritional gaps in poorly planned plant-based diets can counteract any benefits.
Yes, exactly. Achieving mental well-being on a plant-based diet likely needs dual focus, optimizing the microbiome and ensuring adequate intake of critical brain nutrients through food or supplements.
Okay, fascinating nuance there. Let's shift gears again. Athletic performance. This is a big one for many listeners. How does the plant-based diet microbiome axis play into how athletes perform?
This is another exciting emerging area. The gut microbiome is increasingly recognized as a significant factor for athletes, influencing training adaptation, energy, and recovery.
Is there a specific athlete's microbiome? Do athletes generally have different gut bugs than sedentary folks?
It seems so, yeah. Studies often show that athletes, especially endurance athletes, often have distinct profiles, with greater diversity and more bacteria that produce SCFAs or are linked to energy metabolism and lactate use.
And it's bidirectional. Exercise shapes the gut, and the gut shapes performance.
That's the thinking. Exercise often boosts diversity in beneficial microbes, and the microbiome is hypothesized to influence athletic capacity and adaptation.
Okay, so how does the microbiome, potentially shaped by a plant-based diet, affect energy metabolism and fuel use during exercise?
Well, the microbiome contributes a bit to energy by fermenting carbs into SCFAs, which we can absorb and use. More broadly, diet dictates fuel use. Plant-based diets are typically high carb, which is theoretically good for fuel.
What about higher fat and protein diets?
They shift towards fat burning, which might help with ultra-endurance, but could impair high-intensity work. The microbiome adapts its enzymes based on our long-term diet.
So a well-planned plant-based diet provides carbs, and the microbiome might adapt to help use them. What about nutrient absorption for athletes? Any specific issues?
Yes, there are important considerations. The microbiome helps with vitamin K and some B vitamin production and might aid mineral absorption, but more research is needed there. A key concern for plant-based athletes is anti-nutrients in some plant foods, which can reduce the bioavailability of minerals like iron and zinc.
Okay, how does this all potentially translate to endurance, strength, and recovery for plant-based athletes?
For endurance, the high carbs in plant-based diets could be an advantage for glycogen. Potential benefits like better blood flow, less oxidative stress, and lower weight might also help. The microbiome might contribute via SCFAs or lactate use, but direct evidence for superior endurance on plant-based diets versus well-planned omnivorous diets is limited and still sometimes conflicting.
What about strength? Can you build muscle effectively on plants?
Absolutely. If total protein intake is sufficient and protein quality is good, ensuring enough essential amino acids, especially leucine, then yes. Some studies suggest omnivorous diets might allow slightly faster initial gains, but long-term strength gains can be comparable with smart plant-based diet planning.
Right. And recovery? Any plant-based diet advantages there?
The high antioxidants and phytochemicals in plant-based diets may enhance recovery by reducing exercise-induced oxidative stress and inflammation. The microbiome contributes via anti-inflammatory effects and immune modulation.
So potential benefits across the board, but always with that caveat of careful planning, especially for protein and key micronutrients.
Exactly. And one more crucial thing for athletes: stomach troubles. GI distress is common, especially in endurance sports. How does the plant-based diet microbiome link fit in?
Good point. Gut issues can really ruin a race or training session.
Intense or prolonged exercise can increase gut permeability and inflammation. A healthy, resilient microbiome is thought to be protective, strengthening the barrier and modulating immunity.
So a plant-based diet helping the microbiome could help prevent GI issues?
Potentially, yes. Promoting SCFA production and fostering beneficial microbes could help mitigate problems. But caution. Some high-fiber plant-based diet foods are also high in FODMAPs, those fermentable carbs that trigger symptoms in some people.
So again, it comes back to this intricate interplay: diet, microbiome, physiology, performance. The microbiome is this key interface.
Yeah, exactly. And successful plant-based diet implementation for athletes requires meticulous planning for energy, protein quality, and quantity, and of course micronutrients.
Okay, this has been incredibly thorough. For listeners who are now thinking, right, I want to optimize my gut through plant-based eating, what are some actionable, evidence-based strategies they can actually use?
Great question, Emma. We can definitely offer some practical steps. First and foremost, prioritize dietary diversity. Don't just eat the same few plant foods. Aim for a wide variety of different fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, nuts, and seeds.
Eat the rainbow, essentially.
Exactly. Aim for 30 plus different plant types per week if you can. That feeds a diverse microbiome.
30 a week. Okay, a good target. What's next?
Embrace fiber-rich foods. Make whole plant foods the foundation. Include both soluble and insoluble fiber and resistant starch.
Give them that mix of different fiber types we talked about.
Critical. Next, incorporate polyphenol powerhouses. These are foods like berries, grapes, dark chocolate, in moderation of course, green tea, coffee, nuts, seeds, and colorful vegetables.
Indeed. Also include fermented foods, sauerkraut, kimchi, tempeh, miso, and plant-based yogurts with live cultures.
Natural probiotics makes sense, right?
Also, choose quality plant proteins from diverse sources like legumes, soy, nuts, seeds, and quinoa. And for people new to this or upping their fiber intake, transition gradually. Increase fiber slowly to let your gut adapt, and drink plenty of water.
Good advice. What about prebiotics or probiotics?
Consider prebiotic-rich foods first, like chicory root, onions, garlic, and Jerusalem artichokes, to feed your existing good bugs. For probiotics, start with fermented foods. If considering supplements, especially for specific issues or as an athlete, it's probably best to consult a healthcare professional or registered dietitian.
Personalized advice is key. Any other general tips?
Yes, hydration is vital, especially with more fiber. Mindful eating, chewing well, and reducing stress can also help gut health.
And any quick recap for athletes implementing this?
Sure thing. Tailor carbs to training needs, ensure adequate energy and protein intake, time fiber intake around workouts, monitor iron and B12 levels.
Fantastic. Lots of really practical, actionable advice there for harnessing plant power for gut health.
Absolutely. These strategies provide a solid framework for anyone looking to leverage that plant-based diet microbiome connection for better health. So, to really wrap this all up, it's crystal clear that the gut microbiome isn't just a bystander. It's this absolutely crucial intermediary in how plant-based diets affect our health.
It's the central hub, the translator between diet and physiology.
We've seen how it expertly ferments plant components, cranking out those vital SCFAs, and how plant-based diets shape the microbial community, consistently shifting its function towards benefit.
Yes, that consistent increase in SCFAs and beneficial metabolites, and the reduction in less desirable stuff. Those are the really key functional takeaways.
And this translates into some pretty remarkable health advantages: reduced inflammation, better immune balance, improved metabolic markers, and lower cardiovascular risk.
The evidence for that plant-based diet microbiome interaction driving these physical health benefits is quite strong and growing.
The mental well-being link, though, seems a bit more complex, requiring extra attention to overall nutrient intake, not just the microbiome.
It does. There's huge potential via the gut-brain axis, but it's absolutely critical not to overlook the essential brain nutrients that might be harder to get from plants alone.
And for athletes, potential gains in performance and recovery, but contingent on meticulous planning for energy, protein, and those key micronutrients.
Exactly. The microbiome is a switch that athletes can flip with diet, but it needs to be part of a smart, comprehensive strategy.
So the big message seems to be that consciously choosing a diverse, well-planned, whole food, plant-based diet is an incredibly powerful tool. It supports a thriving gut microbiome, which in turn significantly boosts physical health, potentially mental well-being, and can support athletic goals.
That's a fantastic summary, Emma. And it's crucial to remember that individual responses vary. That's why the research into personalized nutrition based on your specific microbiome is so exciting for the future.
Well, this has been an absolutely illuminating deep dive, Christopher. Thank you so much for breaking down this complex world of plant-based diets and the gut microbiome so clearly.
Hey, my pleasure, Emma. It's truly a fascinating area with so much potential for empowering people in their health journeys.
And a huge thank you to all of you listening for joining us today for this in-depth exploration. We really hope you found these insights valuable and maybe even inspiring to think more about that incredible microbial world teeming inside you.
Hopefully with some actionable takeaways too.
Definitely. We encourage you to consider some of those strategies we discussed and maybe explore further based on your own interests and health goals. It really makes you think, doesn't it? How future personalized dietary advice, tailored to our unique microbiome aims, could revolutionize healthcare and wellness.
The potential is certainly there. It's an exciting time for gut health research.
Thanks again to everyone for tuning in to The Chris and Emma Show. We wish you all the very best on your own health journey. Goodbye for now.
Thank you all. Take care, everyone.